Don't let yourself be overheard complaining, not even to yourself. We generate emotional stress through our interactions with the world and often attempt to neutralize it through certain behaviors. In this video, I'll share life-changing habits you can implement right away to tackle emotional stress and significantly improve the quality of your life. Take less offense. When you hear that, what comes to mind? Perhaps you think, what do you mean? Why should I take less offense? Some things are clearly offensive, but let's explore that further. Are they truly? I'd argue that nothing is inherently offensive. For example, imagine a comment you might find offensive. If that comment were inherently offensive, it would evoke the same reaction from everyone who encountered it. But that's not the case. Not everyone reacts the same way, which means the offense isn't in the comment itself, it's within us. This realization is crucial because it empowers us. Instead of blaming the outside world for how we feel, we can start taking responsibility for our internal responses. By learning to take less offense, you can improve your life in countless ways. Consider this example. If you constantly feel offended, whether by social media posts, someone's opinions, or how the world operates, you might unknowingly put yourself in a victim mindset. This perception can make you feel powerless against external forces, trigger behaviors like overeating, excessive drinking, doom scrolling, or other unhealthy coping mechanisms. These habits often serve to numb the emotional stress we create ourselves. Now, let me clarify. I'm not excusing hurtful words or actions. Some comments or behaviors are undeniably problematic and could be expressed more thoughtfully. However, by choosing not to take offense, you protect your emotional well-being. Moreover, if your goal is to influence or change someone's perspective, perhaps that of a family member or colleague, you're much better equipped to do so when you're emotionally composed and not triggered regularly. Taking offense can contribute to chronic stress, which research shows is responsible for as much as 80 to 90% of the health issues doctors encounter daily, while workloads in the new list is commonly seen as stressors. How we perceive and react to the world is an equally significant source of stress. With consistent practice, this is something we can change. Finally, let's look at another perspective. Taking offense frequently could, in some ways, stem from a sense of arrogance. Well, consider this. We live in a world of 8 billion people, each with unique perspectives and experiences, but do we really believe that no one else in the world will have a different perspective from ours? Of course people will. Everyone's life experiences shape how they see the world, whether it's the media they consume, the bosses they've had, or the parents who raised them. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you probably heard me mention one of the most helpful phrases in my life: if I were that other person, I'd likely behave the same way as them. This phrase has been incredibly powerful for me and for many others I've shared it with. At its core, it means this: if I had their childhood, their experiences with bullying, their parents, or their toxic boss at 17, I'd probably view the world just as they do. It doesn't mean you need to agree with them, but it helps you understand their perspective. I had a conversation a few years ago on my podcast with an extraordinary individual, John McAvoy, who truly taught me this lesson. A few years back, he was one of Britain's most wanted men, convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 2 life terms. He was imprisoned in Europe's highest security prison. Today, he is a free man, inspiring people worldwide through the transformative power of physical activity. When he came to my studio, we spent 2 hours discussing his life. And honestly, when he left, I told my wife, if I were John McAvoy, given his upbringing, I'm pretty sure I'd be in jail right now. Once you understand his background, his choices make sense. Now, bringing this back to taking less offense, the next time you come across a comment that you want to take offense to, whether in the moment or later in reflection, you ask yourself why. Why did you feel offended? What would happen if you approached it with curiosity instead, as yourself? Why does that person see the world so differently from me? This shift in perspective isn't just useful when dealing with offense, but also in handling disagreements. For example, statistics show that in the US, 1 in 6 people are currently not speaking to a family member due to political differences. People are passionate about their views, but what does it say about you if you can't communicate with a family member who you once cared about just because you disagree? What if you tried to see things from their perspective? For a moment, imagine what experiences in their life shape their viewpoint. This approach makes engaging with the world softer, and I promise you it works. I've been practicing this for the last 5 years, and it has drastically changed how I interact with others. Very little bothers me now unless I'm overwhelmed, distressed, or sleep deprived. In those cases, I recognize it as a sign I'm slipping into old patterns. But with practice, you can train yourself to respond to differ. About a simple exercise I'd like to share to help you with this. Remember, the goal here is to take less offense and I truly believe that doing so will improve your life. In my new book, Make Change Last, I introduce an exercise called Widen in the Gap, which I'll walk you through now. Next time you feel the urge to take offense at something, try pausing. Ideally, you'll catch yourself in the moment, but if not, you can always reflect on it later through journaling. Here's a step-by-step process to help you gain clarity about the situation and your emotions. What exactly is triggering your desire to take offense? What specifically is bothering you about the situation? Can you view the situation from a different angle? Was it the person's intention to offend you? What story could you tell yourself about the situation that encourages compassion and understanding? Can you imagine a scenario where you'd understand why that person holds their viewpoint? For example, consider their childhood upbringing experiences or relationships. Does this change how you feel about them? Could you have misinterpreted the situation or misunderstood their intent? For instance, how many times have you misread a neutral email because of your own internal state, stress, exhaustion, or overwhelm? Lastly, what would happen if you chose not to take offense with regular practice? You'll notice you feel offended less often and can adopt a more empowering perspective in various situations. This habit will truly change your life. I promise you, I've seen it in my own experience and with my patients. Now on to habit number 2, complain less. Have you ever tracked how much you complain? It's a powerful exercise to monitor your complaints and ask someone close to you, like a partner or a friend, to give you their perspective. They might notice things you don't. Why is this important? Remember, I'm discussing how emotional stress, which we often generate through our interactions with the world, can create problems in our lives, affecting both how we feel and driving behaviors like alcohol consumption or eating sugar. So how does complaining tie into this? When you complain frequently, it's as if you're constantly surprised by the natural course of life. What does that mean? The natural order of the world is that things will always go wrong at times. Things won't always go as planned. And they certainly won't unfold the way you expect or want when you complain regularly, unless it's about something truly worthy of a complaint. What you're really doing is generating emotional stress. You're essentially saying that the world isn't going along with your desires, but how arrogant is that? Is the world really supposed to conform to your expectations? Or should we accept that things will occasionally go wrong? I don't think that means we should adopt a negative view of the world. It means we need a realistic one. For example, in the UK right now, a doctor who practices for 40 years will on average be sued 4 times during their career. If you see enough patients and work long enough, it's just statistically inevitable. It's like being a driver. For many years, at some point, you'll likely be involved in a car accident. Even if you're an excellent driver, the reality is things go wrong. Despite our best efforts, let's take the medical example. A few years ago, a friend of mine, a fantastic doctor, sued after a misdiagnosis related to cancer. Now, I want to acknowledge that this situation must have been incredibly hard for the patient, and I understand why they sought answers, but the case wasn't really her fault. She was dragged into it at the last moment. For the 2 years that this complaint hung over her, it took a toll. She started drinking heavily, lost sleep, and became deeply stressed. Her relationship suffered as well. That adversity really broke her. Now, you might say, yeah, that's a pretty tough situation, and you'd be right, but I'm trying to illustrate that statistically this happens. Doctors get sued. It's inevitable. So the mindset of someone who wants to complain less, or as I say in my book, expect diversity, is one that understands I'm going to get sued at least 4 times in my career. This is one of those times, and I have 3 more to go. You may think this approach trivializes something challenging, but I don't see it that way. I believe it's a mindset that can help you deal with adversity more effectively. With enough practice, you can learn to handle life's obstacles in this way. Let me share a more relatable example from my own life, which I hope will help you understand just how important it is to complain less and expect adversity. For many years, I've helped care for my elderly mother. I remember one evening when she lived about 5 minutes away from me, she had an emergency alarm, R, her C case. She fell. I was sound asleep when suddenly my phone rang. So as the call center informing me that my mom had activated her alarm, she had fallen and couldn't get up. They said they had spoken to her through the intercom and she was asking if I could come help her. I told them to let her know I'd be there as quickly as possible. I rushed downstairs in my pajamas, got into my car, and drove to her house. Once there, I checked that she was okay and helped her back into bed. After about an hour, I was sure she was settled and safe. So I told her I'd check on her again in the morning. I left her house at around 11 p.m. But as I reversed out of her driveway, I accidentally hit a parked car across the street. Now, The older version of me, someone who would have complained and not expected adversity, might have responded differently. I might have thought, I can't believe this is happening to me. I've got so much work to do, and now I have to deal with getting this car fixed. And calling insurance tomorrow, which could take hours. Why me? But I'm not blaming anyone for that kind of response. That used to be me. However, I've learned that the self-pity you generate by responding like that only creates emotional stress. And that stress needs to be neutralized, often leading to behaviors like excessive caffeine, alcohol, sugar, or mindless scrolling, things that might give temporary relief but only make things worse in the long run. Those behaviors are the consequence of how we choose to handle emotional stress in this particular situation. Because I've been practicing complaining less and expecting adversity, my reaction was different. As soon as I hit the car, I paused and thought, no harm done, no one else is hurt, I'm not hurt, I have insurance. I also recognized that if I was going to keep running to my mom's at 11 p.m. meant to help her, something like this was bound to happen eventually. By simply reframing that situation, I had a positive impact on my life. I didn't fall into self-pity, which I could have done. As a result, I didn't need to engage in stress-relieving behaviors like excessive eating or scrolling because there was no emotional stress to neutralize. A simple exercise that helps with this is related to complaining. Every time you catch yourself complaining, try turning that complaint into an action or a moment of gratitude. It's a simple but incredibly powerful exercise that I've practiced for years. When you catch yourself complaining, ask yourself, can I do something about this? If you can, turn it into an action. If you can't, transform it into a moment of gratitude, something you're thankful for in your life. By doing this regularly, you'll change your relationship with complaining and learn to expect adversity, because adversity is coming whether you want it or not. When you reframe your complaint into gratitude, you stop thinking like a victim. When you turn it into an action, you stop acting like one. It's simple but powerful. To ensure you're taking action, after watching this video, I've created a free guide to help you build health and habits. We can all make short-term changes, but can those changes become a lasting part of our lives? Often they don't, which is why I've included the 6 crucial steps in this guide. They're highly effective, and you can access it by clicking the link in the description below. Habit 3 is a practical exercise I call the 3 fists that helps you understand the root cause of your behaviors. So what are the 3 S? They are feel, feed, and find. This is a simple but powerful exercise that can have multiple positive effects on your life, health, happiness, and relationships. Let's go through it with a common scenario. Have you ever found yourself on the sofa around 9:00 p.m. craving something sweet, maybe ice cream or sugar? This is very common. Many patients over the years have said, Doc, I'm great during the day, I eat well, avoid sugar, but in the evening I can't stop to address this. I created the 3 fest exercise. You can use it for sugar cravings, but it works for any behavior you want to reset, whether it's alcohol, gambling, or mindless scrolling Instagram. Here's how it works. Imagine you're sitting on the sofa and feel the urge to eat something sweet before you get up to grab that ice cream. Pause for a moment and ask yourself the first F, what am I feeling right now? Is it physical hunger or emotional hunger? It's crucial to ask this question because we often eat for emotional reasons, loneliness, stress, sadness, rather than physical hunger. Understanding the difference is key in changing our behavior. When you're craving something like ice cream, ask yourself, am I physically hungry or am I emotionally hungry? By pausing to ask this, you're creating space between the feeling and the action. Over time, this space will grow and you'll gain more awareness of your behaviors. So you go ahead and eat the ice cream. A few days later, you're back on the sofa feeling the urge again. First, ask yourself, what am I feeling? Once you identify the feeling, move to the second feed. How does this ice cream address the feeling? For example, if you're stressed, the sugar may give you temporary relief. Or if you're lonely, the ice cream might comfort you now for the third FFT. Fine. With this awareness, can you find a different behavior to feed that feeling? If you're stressed, instead of sugar, maybe you could do a 9-unit yoga session or some movement. If you're lonely, calling a friend could provide the connection you're seeking. If you've been on Zoom calls all day and need nourishment, maybe a bath or a quiet moment for yourself would be a better alternative. By using this 3-step exercise, feel, feed, and find, you better understand the role your behaviors play and discover healthier alternatives that address the emotions you're experiencing. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is making one small promise to yourself each day. In keeping it, you are subconsciously asking yourself 2 important questions. Can I trust myself? Can I rely on myself? These are the same questions you'd ask when you meet a new person for the first time. As humans, we are always sizing up those around us, but we are also doing this internally, constantly evaluating ourselves. And here's the thing, when you say you're gonna do something and you don't follow through, you're answering those questions with a no. You're telling yourself, I can't rely on me. This might seem like a small thing, but over time, this builds up. It chips away at your confidence and your belief in your own ability to follow through. It's crucial to keep your promises to yourself, no matter how small they seem. This habit doesn't require grand gestures or huge goals. It can be as simple as making a promise to drink more water, get 5 minutes of exercise, or meditate for 2 minutes. The key is consistency. I'll give you an example from my own life. Every morning, without fail, I do a F-minute strength workout while my coffee brews. It's a very simple thing, but it's powerful because it sets the tone for my day. No matter how busy I am, no matter how much work I have to do for my family or for my patients, I make time for this small promise to myself. It shows me that even when life gets hectic, I can always carve out 5 minutes for myself. The beauty of this habit is that it's not just about physical exercise, it's about demonstrating to yourself that you can be reliable. It's about showing yourself that you can make commitments and keep them even in the middle of chaos. And when you do this consistently, day after day, you build trust with yourself. You reinforce the belief that you can rely on yourself to get things done. If you think about it, we often keep our promises to others. If we tell a friend, we'll call them, we do it. If we promise a colleague, we'll meet a deadline, we follow through. But how often do we keep those same promises to ourselves? We tend to put ourselves at the bottom of the priority list, but making small commitments to yourself and sticking to them changes, that it shows you that you matter just as much as anyone else. Now, I want to challenge you, think about a small promise you can make to yourself today. Maybe it's getting outside for a 10-minute walk, writing down one thing you're grateful for, or just taking a few minutes to breathe deeply and relax. The key is to choose something achievable, something that you know you can do every day. Once you've made that promise, stick to it no matter what. It could be as simple as making your bed every morning or taking a few minutes to plan your day. And I'd love to hear what you choose. Drop a comment below and let me know what promise you'll make to yourself today. Sharing your commitment is a great way to hold yourself accountable, and it creates a community where we can all encourage each other to build better habits. There's a lot of negativity online, but together we can create an uplifting, positive space where we inspire each other to take action and make real changes in our lives. We often hear about the negative effects of social media, but what if we could turn that around? Instead of just focusing on the negatives, why can't we create a positive space right here? A place where you can go into the comments and share what you're going to do that day to make a change and inspire others to do the same. It doesn't have to be huge, it doesn't have to be perfect, but every small step counts. So if you can let me know in the comments what small promise you're making to yourself today. It could be something as simple as doing 10 push-ups, journaling for 5 minutes, or asking yourself the powerful question I've mentioned before: what's the most important thing I have to do today? You ask yourself that question each morning, answer it, and then take action. It doesn't matter what that action is. What matters is that you do it. Why is this so powerful? Because when you start doing this regularly, you change the way you view yourself. You're no longer just someone who says things. You're someone who follows through. That shift, no matter how small it feels at first, builds confidence and creates positive momentum. It becomes part of who you are. And I know this isn't just theory. This is something that works. Over the years, I've seen the simple approach transform lives, especially those who were stuck in dark places. People who felt they had no motive, people who were struggling with deep emotional pain, people who had even thought about giving up. And what I've found is that helping them make just one small promise each day, something they could do and keep, has been a game changer. It's helped them feel like they can trust themselves again. That tiny shift often leads to much bigger changes down the road when you're in a dark place and feel like you can't do anything. Showing yourself that you can follow through on a small promise changes everything. It may seem small at first, but it's that little act of consistency that helps you see that you can do something. And that's what starts to rebuild your self-esteem. As you feel more positive about yourself, you also start to build momentum. Momentum is powerful once it gets going. It's incredibly hard to stop. So I challenge you today, pick one small thing, make a promise to yourself and keep it. It's not about perfection, it's about showing up for yourself. And once you do that, watch as it starts to transform your relationship with yourself and how you approach life. If you're finding these ideas helpful, I encourage you to check out my book, Make Change That Lasts: 9 Simple Ways to Break Free from the Habits That Are Holding You Back. It's available as a paperback, ebook, and audiobook, which I'm narrating myself. It dives deeper into the strategies I use to help people make lasting change, and I think you'll find it valuable. Now, back to the topic of emotional stress. One of the biggest sources of stress we face is often the negative view we have of ourselves. When you say you're going to do something and don't follow through, it starts to build a negative image of who you are. You start thinking you can't rely on yourself, and that erodes your self-confidence. But by taking small actions and keeping small promises, you break that pattern. You build up trust with yourself. You prove to yourself that you can do what you say, and that is a game changer. I've seen this simple practice save lives. I've worked with patients who were in deep emotional turmoil, some even struggling with suicidal thoughts. They felt like they couldn't do anything, but with just one small promise to themselves each day, they started to change. It was just one tiny action that began to shift their self-perception, and over time, that one small promise turned into a foundation of strength, self-worth, and momentum. So I urge you to give this a try. Even if it's something tiny, start with something small you can do every day and let it snowball from there. Trust me, the changes you make today will have a profound effect on your life tomorrow. Make one small promise to yourself every day and keep it. Let me know below what that promise is, because it's such a simple yet powerful practice that can transform the way you see yourself and your potential for change. Now, moving on to habit number 5, seek out nature. Let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. Human beings have evolved in nature. We haven't evolved living indoors in houses and apartments with all the comforts and shelter of modern life. But here's the staggering: despite how ingrained nature is in our evolution, most of us spend very little time outside these days, and yet nature is crucial for so many aspects of our health. For instance, our circadian rhythm, which is the internal clock that governs nearly every cell in our body, is deeply influenced by the natural world around us. Seeing natural light in the morning is incredibly important for setting that rhythm correctly, helping us regulate everything from sleep to mood. But in the context of this video, which has been focused on internal emotional stress, I want to highlight how profound an impact nature has on our stress levels. We know, for example, that simply being in nature can reduce the levels of cortisol, the body's stress hormone. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, 80 to 90% of the cases I see as a doctor are related to stress in some form, whether it's stress affecting our brain, gut, mood, sleep, or behavior. The impact of stress on our health is massive, and reducing it is critical. So why does nature have this calming effect on us? One fascinating reason is fractals. Fractals are geometric patterns that we don't typically find in man-made surfaces, but they're abundant in nature. Think of rivers, oceans, trees, and coastlines. Scientific research shows that when the human eye sees a fractal pattern, cortisol levels start to drop, which helps reduce stress. This means that even just being around natural landscapes or even looking at images of nature can have a positive physiological impact on our well-being. Now, I want you to think about how you can bring nature into your daily life. It doesn't have to be a big long hike once a week, though that's amazing if you can do it. What I'm really encouraging you to do is find a way to get a daily dose of nature. You might be thinking, I don't live near a park or forest. It takes me an hour to drive somewhere just to be a nature, but here's the thing, nature is everywhere. Even if you don't have access to a natural landscape, simply looking at pictures of nature can help reduce cortisol, although it's not as powerful as experiencing it in person. They think about it. Do you have any pot plants in your home or office? Maybe you could place a plant by your desk or window and just take a moment to appreciate it. The fractal patterns and the leaves will have an impact on you. Even staring at a tree outside your office window or patch of grass can trigger that same relaxation response. This is why so many tech companies like Apple and Microsoft feature images of nature in their screens, as they're tapping into the calming effect that nature has on us. In addition to the physical benefits nature offers, a broader, more philosophical reason for why it's so important for our well-being perspective. When we spend time in nature, we get a broader view of the world. We step away from our narrow day-to-day concerns and realize how small we are in the grand scheme of things. And this shift in perspective can reduce stress, helping us put things in their proper context. One of the unfortunate consequences of urbanization is that people living in cities often experience health declines. Of course, there are many reasons for this, but I believe one significant factor is the lack of green spaces. When you're surrounded by concrete and buildings, your view of the world becomes narrow and Limiting your vision is focused inward, just like how we would instinctively narrow our focus if we were running away from danger. But when you're out in nature, especially when you can see the horizon, whether it's a mountain, the ocean, or simply a wide open field, your perspective broadens. You start to feel more expansive, less confined. This shift from a narrow to a broad view is the opposite of stress response, which helps to regulate and calm your nervous system. So I really want you to think about how you can make nature a part of your daily routine. It could be as simple as taking a walk in the park, sitting by a tree, or even just appreciating the beauty of a plant or flower. Nature is a powerful antidote to the stress we carry inside. And by seeking it out, you can help recalibrate your body and mind when you're stressed. You're often laser focused on the immediate threat in front of you. Your attention is narrow, and your vision becomes constricted. But when you step outside and allow your eyes to relax, focusing on the broader view rather than the details, your perspective literally shifts. You begin to see things in a more expansive way, and this helps reduce the stress response. The science behind this is fascinating. Peripheral vision, which happens when you soften your gaze and allow your field of view to widen, has been shown to lower stress levels. This is a powerful practice. So think about it. In between Zoom calls, can you step outside, look around, and let your vision relax? It doesn't have to be a long break. Just a few minutes of allowing your eyes to take in the larger landscape can help lower stress significantly. What's even more interesting is that this change in vision doesn't just affect your body's stress levels, it changes your perspective on the world around you. When you're able to take a broader, less focused view, you'll find that you're less likely to take offense or internalize things personally. You gain the ability to step back to see things in context and to respond more thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. So ask yourself, am I really physically hungry or am I emotionally hungry? And then go ahead and eat if you want what you're doing. What you're doing by simply asking yourself that first F is building a little bit of space between the feeling and the behavior. And once you start creating that space, that's where the magic starts to happen. For so many of us, we feel something and immediately act on the behavior. There's no space, but there is space there. The more you practice this exercise, the more you'll start to expand that space, and the more you'll begin to understand your own behavior. So you've gone ahead and eaten it. A few days later, you're back on the sofa again, feeling that urge. Now go to the first F. What am I really feeling? Then ask yourself the second F, which is feed. Now that I know the feeling, how does this ice cream feed the feeling? Oh, okay, so I was feeling stressed when I have ice cream. At least in the short term, I feel less stressed. Oh, now I understand the role this behavior is playing in my life. Or maybe you're feeling lonely, or you've been by yourself all day, and maybe that's why you turn to sugar. At least you're understanding it now, and that's the key. Understanding the feeling and how sugar is addressing that feeling. And then you go to the third F, either at that time or the next time you're back on the sofa, work through them. What am I feeling? How does food feed the feeling? And then the third F is F. Now that I know the feeling, now that I know how food feeds the feeling, can I find an alternative behavior to feed that feeling? For example, if you're feeling stress and sugar helps you feel less stressed, can you find another way to address that stress? Maybe you like movement or yoga. You could go on YouTube and do a 10-minute yoga sequence that will also help you feel less stressed, but perhaps in a more helpful way than using sugar to manage stress. Or if you're feeling lonely and that's why you want ice cream, instead of going to the ice cream, you could get your phone out and call a friend, or maybe phone one of your parents, a work colleague, or someone you're friendly with. The real need is to address the feeling of isolation. If, for example, you've been on Zoom calls all day, you've had no time to yourself, and that sweet treat on the sofa is your way of nourishing yourself. How could you nourish yourself in a way that doesn't involve ice cream? Maybe you could run yourself a bath, light a candle, and nourish your whole body and mind by having a relaxing bath for 15 minutes. This is a very powerful exercise you can use for all kinds of things. It will really help you understand the role your behaviors play in your life. And in my experience, the only way to make lasting changes is by understanding why those behaviors exist in the first place. Now, there are 3 FS here. I would argue that although all 3 are important, the first one is the most important. If all you do is ask yourself, what am I really feeling? You will start to change your life, because that awareness changes your relationship with that behavior. I've seen it over and over again. I've worked with many patients, and once they have a deep awareness of why they're going for sugar, junk food, alcohol, or whatever it might be, that's when the change starts. Make one small promise to yourself each day and keep it. This is one of my favorite habits. It's something I do myself, and something I've been recommending to my patients for years. Every single day, ask yourself 2 questions. Can I trust myself? can I rely on myself? It's similar to how we feel when we meet a new person for the first time. We subconsciously ask, can I trust them? Can I rely on them? Humans are social animals who are always sizing up the people around us, but we're also asking ourselves those two questions every single day. And that's why I believe one of the most toxic things for your health and well-being is saying you're going to do something and not doing it. You tell yourself, I said I would do it, but then don't follow through. And then in your mind, you tell yourself that you can't trust or rely on yourself. This habit is powerful because if you promise yourself one small thing and do it, you start to build trust with yourself. It doesn't have to be a big promise, but it has to be something you keep. For example, I do a 5-minute strength workout every morning while my coffee brews. It's simple, but by doing it every morning, I'm showing myself that no matter how busy I am, I'm still making time for me. It's one small, consistent promise kept every day. So I want you to think about what promise you can make to yourself that you can keep every day. It could be anything minus 10 push-ups, germing, or something like the anti-business question I've mentioned before. What's the most important thing I need to do today? You ask yourself that every morning, answer it, and then do it. Why is this so powerful? Because once you start doing this regularly, you change the way you view yourself. You become someone who says they're going to do something, and then they do it. It builds self-esteem, helps you feel positive about yourself, and also creates momentum, arguably the most important force in any change. I've seen this habit transform lives, even for people in the darkest places. I've worked with patients who had suicidal thoughts and felt like they couldn't do anything, and I helped them make one small promise each day and keep it. That small promise saved lives, because when you're in a dark place and feel like you can't do anything, showing yourself that you can do just one small thing changes how you view yourself. It builds your self-esteem, and you begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who gets things done. Momentum builds, and once momentum is there, it's very hard to stop. So give that a try, guys. The 5th habit is to seek out nature. We haven't evolved to live indoors in houses and apartments. Human beings evolved in nature, and yet it's staggering how little time most of us spend outdoors these days, but it's incredibly important for many aspects of our health, including regulating our circadian rhythm, which is essential for keeping every cell in our body operating optimally. I could give an entire video on why nature is so vital, but in the context of this video, which is about emotional stress, nature has profound effects. We know that simply being in nature reduces cortisol, the stress hormone. And remember, 80 to 90% of what a doctor sees is stress-related. Stress affects our brain, gut, mood, sleep, and behaviors, and it's huge. Simply stepping into nature can help reduce stress levels, and it's amazing how much this simple practice can help. If you can't get out into nature every day, just looking at a picture of nature can reduce cortisol levels. This is why companies like Apple and Microsoft often use images of nature on their screen servers. They know it makes us feel better and lowers our stress levels. So how can you incorporate nature into your life every day? Do you have houseplants? Like, could you take a walk outside and look at the trees, or even just gaze out the window at a park or garden? The fractals in nature, those geometric shapes found in rivers, trees, and coastlines, have been shown to reduce stress and make us feel calmer. Even just a few minutes spent looking at a plant or tree can have a positive impact on your body's stress response. Another broader reason to seek out nature is because it shifts your perspective. When you're in nature, you're not just focused on the immediate. Begin to see the bigger picture. It reminds you of your place in the world, which can help you take less offense and react less emotionally. You realize how small you are in the grand scheme of things, which makes the little annoyances and stresses seem less important. Finally, when we spend too much time indoors, particularly in urban environments, our perspective narrows. Our vision becomes more inward and focused, but in nature we expand our vision and let our minds relax. The act of looking out and seeing the horizon softens our stress response, allowing us to be more relaxed and open-minded. You don't need to do all habits at once. Pick one or two that you think you can implement right away and start incorporating them into your routine. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll really like the next one. It covers a concept I talk about with my patients that always gets great feedback. It's one of those insights that can completely change how you approach life. Stay tuned.